Okay.
Okay, great. We're live. The mayor is at our city's Juneteenth celebration. So as vice chair, I will be chairing this meeting until he joins us. I'm going to call to order the June 18th committee of the whole meeting at 5:07. All who can, please rise and salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo,
Here.
Mr. Caggiano,
Here.
Mr. Kingston,
Here.
Mr. Matera, Mrs. Borealis,
Present.
Ms. Monteroso,
Present.
Mayor Keith.
Okay, so the first item on our agenda is the continuation of the cell phone policy. So thank you to all our principals and assistant principals for being here the day after school ended. So we appreciate you. So we're gonna start with that first, just for the sake of their time, and then we'll move on to our consent agenda. So I believe we wanted to just, you may have heard from last meeting, there was just, we wanted to really engage in a discussion with you all about how you feel the cell phone policy is going in terms of implementation within like classrooms, like teacher support, and if there's ways that we can really support you all as well to ensure that it continues. So I'll open the floor up to see if there's questions from my fellow committee members first, so we can just begin the discussion.
Do you want them to introduce themselves
Yes,
and what
that would
school
be
they're
great.
at?
Oh, yes, why don't we start with that? We can
Caitlin,
go-
you want to start?
Caitlin Riley, the deputy principal at Revere High School.
Chris Bowen, principal at the high school.
Joanne Willett, principal, Susan B. Anthony Middle School.
Heather Bob, principal at the Revere Marsh Academy.
Thad King, principal of the Garfield Middle School.
Ann McLaughlin, assistant principal at Susan B. Anthony Middle School.
Soon to be.
We're now
Come on.
moving to the Hill School for the next year.
Congratulations. Thank you. So, members who started to bring this up, is there any like questions people have to start the conversation off? Or thoughts?
I mean, I'll start.
Yeah.
I guess my question is it being implemented? And if not, you know, what are the obstacles that we're facing?
And I think it means the
Cell phone policy.
cell phone policy that says no cell phones.
Right.
I can start. So at the Rumney, we are enforcing this. Every morning I'll announce to the kids in English and in Spanish, it's a day C or B or whatever the day is. Remember, your cell phone is off and away and in your own backpack, in your own locker with only your own belongings. And then we follow the policy of the first time, if you're caught with your phone, you can get it at the end of the day. It will be in the office. And then this year, every subsequent offense after that, we do have the parent come to the building to pick it up. So an administrator will call the family and say, unfortunately, Joanne, was caught with her phone for a second time. This is becoming a problem. We do need you to come to the building and pick it up. And I think it's opened up for us a way to increase communication with families around this and help them be a team member and kind of solving the problem.
Very similar at SBA. We have a similar announcement in the morning. It's in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, where we remind them that cell phones need to be away. And they similarly, we'll have teachers will take the phone if they're using it or if it's out, and then an administrator will go to the classroom to retrieve the phone. We track it on a spreadsheet. The first time they'll get it back at the end of the day, but any time after, it is a parent, guardian, or someone over 18 from the family that needs to come in and pick it up.
Yeah, I think the Garfields are actually very similar. We end every morning's announcements with a reminder to turn off your cell phones and put them away for the day. And, if we see students in the halls, wherever it is, the students are very respectful of it, generally speaking. You put your hand out, you ask for it, typically they'll hand you the phone over. We have a place in the office where it's held and the students can come and pick up their cell phones at the end of the day. If it becomes repetitive, we keep them until the families can come and pick them up. I would say there might be one or two students that I can think of off the top of my head that will refuse to turn over the cell phones. But that's typically not in a classroom, that's typically in the office, something like that. But then we just deal with that separately, with the families.
Yeah.
And the repeat offenders, that once it becomes a time when they're, you know, having their phone taken away multiple times and the family has been in to pick up the phone, we'll have them drop it off in the office for like the 10 days and we kind of track that. As that was outlined, or some students will drop them off with the consent from the family because they want them to have it for safety, but for the remainder of the year. And they just drop it off in the morning and pick it up at 2:20. That's very few, but we've had a few kids have to do that.
Do all the middle schools use that similar tracking spreadsheet, or is that like unique to SBA?
I use the tracking spreadsheet, so I've had data for 3 years on.
We log in Power School, so we go straight into Power School so that we can look at last year and the prior year, once they get to 8th grade, like, is this an ongoing problem that we're having? Is this a meeting that we need to have with the family? Is there some urgent situation that we don't know about, maybe that is causing the student to want to need the phone? So we use Power School for that.
To my knowledge, we don't track it in any particular way other than pick them up from the students and keep them in the office at the end of the day.
I'm just gonna go on my personal experiences, like at the Garfield, and Joan was with me at the book, I had a book thing, and a third grader called up a bomb scare. So are we having them check it in? I can't say for the early schools, or are we just doing the honor system? And then I was barbecuing at the Garfield, and probably a second grader, third grader came out, and he had the cell phone in his hand and called his mother to pick him up. So I'm kind of concerned about that. The high school, I think it's a bigger problem. I mean, I walked in, I came in about a month and a half ago to talk to the plumbing program. I think you knew I was coming in. And then I walk around the corner and everybody got cell phones. So I'm just having, we are concerned about it. I know at the vocational schools, everybody, we have like, where you put like shoes. And like I said, at the beginning of every class, kids check it in and then they take it when they leave. So we do have some incidences, but overall, it's not that bad. And I think it starts from the training from the kids when, like in the first or second grade.
So one thing I should clarify is we only brought middle and high school principals here today. We didn't bring
Okay.
the elementary
Okay.
principals to talk about their issues. I can tell you anecdotally that they see even fewer issues than the middle school
Yeah.
principals do.
I'd agree, yeah, I'd agree with that. It
Yeah.
seems like it's predominantly the high school with some instances happening in the middle school, but mostly the issues with the high school, I would say.
Absolutely. I think that, I think we'd love to use this time to kind of have a conversation about what are some of the challenges that we've had in implementing that policy. Our goal, I think when we speak with teachers, when we talk about what is going on in classrooms, I think I'll use the word addiction, but the addiction to cell phones is probably the biggest detractor of adolescents' time on learning. And I think that it is, we don't challenge that. We don't question that at all. I think the challenges that we've had is that there have been some very real bumps along the way in terms of implementing the policy with fidelity that kind of, to me, stem from when are the appropriate times in a high school setting for an 18, 19, 17-year-old to have a phone, and when are the times that is not appropriate, which is during class time. And then at the classroom level, when we think about kind of what are the tier 1 moves that we're asking teachers to do to keep phones in bag and off, and how do we support teachers in feeling comfortable implementing those and having a kind of all hands on deck approach to that. That's teachers, that's us, my team, that's parents as well. And I think, I'll give a few examples of some things we've struggled with. We've struggled with, there's a number of teachers who do feel that a sense of concern about taking the phones from the students, whether it is because philosophically they struggle with the policy or they agree with the policy, but the scale of the challenge at the high school level, it is very different in a high school of 2,200 students, and break that down to the classrooms, than it is in the middle school setting. And I think we've struggled to think about what are the best ways to support teachers in that at the classroom level and then at the building level. So I'd love to kind of, if it'd be okay with you, to kind of talk through some of those challenges and kind of think about where we can go. Like, we are on board with having our school be as phone free as possible when it is appropriate for that to happen, given the population and the age of students that we have, and kind of troubleshoot some of the challenges that have come up. And so if you'd be open to that conversation, I'd love to kind of talk through some of those things.
Yeah, walk us
Yeah.
through.
Awesome. So I mean, I think the first piece that when we think about, we've got 185 teaching faculty that are classroom teachers. We've got another 30 or so faculty members that are in support roles, counselors, social workers. If we think about consistency of that policy at the classroom level, like what we need is a classroom level strictness on phones. Then my team is able to support teachers implement. I think the challenges teachers feel about, is it theirs to take? Is it the liability, I'll use that word in quotes, but of docking phones on the wall? We have had multiple instances when phones are stolen from those docking stations.
Right.
So I guess things that we'd like to think about is, is the docking on the wall or in a secure space in the classroom, maybe something that happens like at the next offense?
We even had kids that had burner phones.
Oh,
They turn
absolutely.
the phone,
Every,
so-
plenty of that, plenty of the fake phones that they turn in. But I think that I struggle with saying every classroom teacher has to make the kid dock the phone as soon as it comes into the classroom. I know that's not what the policy says, but if we think about how do we implement that policy at scale in a building of our size, it requires that level of consistency across the board. I want to support teachers who want to dock it that way. I struggle with like saying that's what we need to do. And so I think that that is whether how a teacher goes about taking the phone and in the policy is a point of contention and a point of conversation. We need to engage with teachers more about that and find out how we can support them and what we have work to do there. Like I admit that we have work to do there, but that's a real challenge I found. We also have a lot of students who are that are caring for siblings, that are waiting for shift work, that are parents themselves, that have a variety of responsibilities that I don't, it's at a scale that it is not realistic, I don't think, to say that from 7:50 in the morning until 2:20, with the one exception of that 30-minute lunch period, an 18-year-old student who is a parent cannot have access to their phone. That doesn't mean they should be looking at it and doing things while they're in their math class, while they're trying to take a math test. It's not all one end or the other end of the spectrum, but I think there are some nuances that sound like a one-off, but across a school population of 2,200 students, we're talking 50 kids that are in this spot, and then 70 kids that are in another spot, and then 150 in another. I don't have strong data on that I can try to think about, but I think the scale of the school, the scale of the problem at the school in terms of implementation is something. I'm trying to think if there's the I think about in the hallways, right? The idea of how we can better enforce an expectation that when class is going on, you're not taking your phone to the bathroom, you're not taking your phone and having that out in the hallway. That is definitely something we need to be better at. I think the amount of potential instances of potential conflict that come from that, it becomes that was a struggle for us at the beginning of the year. We really tried to focus on the in-classroom support, what's going on in the classroom. And that was just there was a struggle there. So I feel like there's the how we go about enforcing a no phones in the hallway rule, how we go about supporting classroom teachers in their own classrooms, implement a policy that without requiring them to take a phone or take all the phones when it comes in. There's issues there. There's the nuance of like why students need their phone, I think legitimately, across the day. Now, that said, 80% of students, I think, will follow the system that we put in place when it is consistently enforced, right? And then that's where we kind of think about those tiers and how we do that better. What's the next 15% that has more unique needs? What's the more 5%? I think we have plenty of students like the middle schools that are on contracts with their assistant principal where they're docking their phone for periods of time, that their phone is taken as a consequence sometimes for things unrelated to phones, but it is definitely a lever to work with students on. And so it's just the scale of the challenge when there's 8 of us, right, that are positioned as administrators, 7 next year are positioned as administrators to be, enforcing that in the hallway. To me, it really comes down to how do we support teachers better in the classrooms so we're consistent across the board. We want to be as phone free as possible, that in a way that makes sense for the majority of students, and have some leeway, I don't know if that's the right word, for situations where it would be appropriate for a student to have access to a phone for a period of time. And I think that's what we've struggled with. So
Just to support what you're saying, and I've worked as a high school principal as well, and at a much smaller building, but it's the exact same concerns that you outlined. Our students who have their own children, one, and just as importantly, students who have jobs, that they're working to support their families. It's not about their job because they're just going for a little pocket money. They're supporting their families, and whether or not they get that shift tonight is really stressful for them. And if we say no phones, they're not focused on anything more than you can tell them they don't get their phone. They're not gonna learn math, English, science, social studies, anything until they know whether or not they got that shift to make a few extra dollars to support their family at home. It's a really important piece in their lives. And they can't function until they get to know that that shift manager told them, you got that shift tonight, or you didn't get that shift tonight. Because it's impactful for them in the moment and every day. And it's a very real thing that I wouldn't have believed unless I'd seen it and talked to students about it. They'll sit down and be really honest with you. They'll show it to you on your phone. Mister, I am waiting to hear from, my person to say that I can work tonight. Because they need that. They need that for their families. It's not just about
And I'd
themselves.
say the reality is that while we have a large number of students in that spot.
Yep.
I'm not trying to spin it as 100% of our
No.
students are in that spot also, right? So I think there's this,
But it's real.
it is real, right? And so I think that it's real at a scale that is large and impactful that makes implementation challenging.
And we probably don't recognize how large that is,
Right.
I think, and to be realistic about it. I know you mentioned you don't have data for that, but it is a very real situation.
I think though, I agree with all of what you're saying, but I think part of what we're doing as educators is helping kids self-regulate and navigate when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate, and how to be responsible even in that workplace. So they're not gonna go to the workplace and take out their phone in the middle of their shift because they're waiting to hear about the babysitter. So what are the supports that we have in place during the school day to help them navigate when it's appropriate? Because I would say, I don't know if it's 50-50 or what the data is on the number of kids, but teen parenthood is not new. It's not like, it didn't come with the iPhone. So there have been ways around this, and I think we can continue to maybe work on those. In terms of hallway, we have our passing time. I mean, it's a much smaller building over at the Rumney, but the passing time is limited and the teachers are in the hallway. That's the expectation. And they do that. They're in the doorway and they're moving kids along. So a student wouldn't think of, I'm going to take my cell phone out, because they know I'm in front of 123. When I get to 125, there's going to be another teacher. When I get to 127, there's going to be another teacher. So that is something I think that you hit upon that's important, that there is a feel, not only among staff, but among kids too, that this is consistent and everybody is on board, which is a lot easier said than done when we're talking about the scale of a giant building with nooks and crannies and stairwells.
I'm interested in learning, what's being done in order to achieve some consistency. I feel like the examples that you're giving, even if they represent a larger portion than we can imagine, that's where discretion comes in.
Right.
But there's a policy in place and that policy needs to be followed. So I'm interested in knowing what we're doing at the high school in order to implement that policy.
Yeah.
I understand the challenges, and these are the very real issues that we're facing, but it seems like not addressing the policy is not helping either.
Correct.
So it should be carte blanche with discretion in instances. I mean, and again, that goes to teachers developing relationship with students and understanding what's going on at the moment. If the student comes up to the teacher and says, Miss, I have to use the phone because of X, Y, and Z, I have to check. I can see a student stepping out and and doing that, and that should be fine. But I am interested in knowing what we're doing at the high school in order to achieve a sense of consistency and implementation of the policy.
So I mean, this is, and I think it's no secret that there have been struggles in the implementation of that this year. So I'm not trying to pretend that we have figured that out and that we are implementing that perfectly. We spent a lot of time this past Q4 with people from my team and people for our teachers, educators in different roles from the RTA, collaborating on a variety of issues. One was around kind of how we communicate better when there's issues that arise. I think a lot of this does come down to communication, comes down to the follow that, closing the loop, so to speak. And I think when that communication cycle isn't tight, which it hasn't been, and we're working to fix that next year, things fall apart. And so one area is really developing like a clear, consistent loops of communication between teachers when they have concerns. What's an email? What's a phone call? What's a contact referral? How do we do that? We designed that with a team of teachers and team of administrators. At our principals meeting, we broke out into groups and kind of dissected that. This was this last week when we're kind of ready. We're making refinements over the summer, but I think first step is making sure that there's a more clear path of communication with clear norms on what kind of follow-up can teachers expect in what period of time. And I feel really good about like where we can start the school year on that, because if we're not communicating well about these things, the policy falls apart. And so I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing was the second kind of topic that we dug into was really around attendance at the classroom level, at the school level. There's a lot to talk about with attendance, that's its own thing, but I think that there's a connection between cell phones and attendance. And I think that came up loud and strong in how we're talking about implementing an attendance policy next year that is stricter, that is more accountable, and getting kind of clear on like, what is the way we teachers respond? What is the way administrators respond for different scenarios? Cell phones kind of fits into that category. And I think that I feel strong and we're good about kind of where that group landed in terms of recommendations. One thing that did come up in our principals meeting when we were going through this was the number of teachers that, as we're talking about, I think that came up, was proposed was, you know, when students leave to go to the bathroom, that they don't take their phone with them. That was like an expectation. And there was, in every group that we had, there was a significant amount of like teacher, I won't say pushback, but concern about that. Like what does that do to, we need to problem solve around that.
Is it the confrontation?
I think it's the confrontation. I think especially from the beginning of the year with students you don't know who are used to this, and it is going to be the case that there's going to be a need for enforcement of that policy from the jump in a way that was stronger than last year. And that makes the very first interaction between teacher and student very much filled with confrontation. Not every student, I want to be very clear, the vast majority of kids are going to follow that, but I think we need to find a better way to support teachers who don't feel that they are, or maybe anticipate not being supported in that confrontation, and how we deal with that consistently. So if the conflict happens in your class versus in John's class, like how does that happen? And how do they reach out for support in the moment? Is it after the fact? All of that fits back with the communication piece. So I think, yes, the conflict, that's not because teachers are afraid of conflict with students or holding them accountable. I think it can escalate very quickly in terms of how frustrated students feel. And then that turns into that kid the first day of class saying, I'm not going back to that class. And so there's a connection between how that phone results in some conflict and then leads to kind of takes away from our efforts to try to improve attendance and all that. And so it's not that we don't want to focus on both, but it's how many things can one focus on well at the beginning of the school year, at the classroom level, because it starts with that classroom level strictness and.
Well, maybe it's setting the expectation, like what the policy is before the kids come to school.
Right.
So that way, when they're in the wrong or using it and they're called out on it,
Right.
It's like, what else were you expecting?
And I think that going along that lines, kind of looking with assistant principals around which students do we know are consistently in conflict over their phone. That group of students in August, we're kind of thinking of what is the different kind of outreach to those families about how we're expecting those students to engage from the jump, versus to kind of maybe prevent those from even popping up in the classroom when the school year starts. And so I think that's an important part of it too, because we can predict which kids are in which tiers. And how do we as an administrative team be more supportive of teachers by handling those kids that are in the top tier that is most challenged by cell phone use or most likely to have conflict, I think goes along with it. It's not just the whole school, have all the families in to talk about this, though that's needed. And we need to say, if you want to reach your kid, texting them, calling them isn't the way. How do we do that? I have questions about that, but that needs to be a community-wide conversation. But for 200 kids in the school, there's probably a set of conversations that need to happen and agreements that need to happen prior. And those kids know it because they're also the ones who had their phones taken and docked and all of that from last year. So I think it's,
It sounds simple,
Can I
but
just-
just hearing that we do not, at the end of our morning announcement, say, and a reminder, and to hear that, that's
what they
move
do.
it all through the schools is like a simple, I think our teachers did a good job to start the year trying to narrate the change in the policy, and they were glad to hear that. It was then, our collective follow-up, but to just add in the daily reminder and all of the ways that students hear that.
And let
to
me
set
ask
up
you,
the follow-through.
if admin are in the hallway and there's teachers and students in the hallway and they're on their phones, like I have this image of, the bell ringing, I don't know if it still rings, but
Yeah.
and all the
Yeah.
students, funneling through the hallways and they're on their phones. I mean, and you see them on their phones, or
Yeah.
maybe you don't,
Right.
but if you do see them on your phones, do the admin like talk to use that as an opportunity to talk to the teacher right then and there? Or to
Can I
say
ask, you
like,
mean, you look in the classroom and you see students?
whether it's the classroom or the hallway, but if you're observing teachers who are witnessing a violation of the cell phone policy, are there discussions that are happening at that moment about that?
That is an area of focus for us next year. That has not, because of some of the issues I've named in terms of some teachers sort of resistance to, am I taking like how to implement that at the classroom level? We need to work with them to model and teach that better so that follow-up can happen in that way consistently. And it's like, what are the things that we are having those kind of conversations with teachers about? I think classroom from hallway at passing time is classroom, hallway at passing time, where you've got hundreds of kids.
Mhm.
And, and yes, there's one adult at the door, but that hundreds of kids.
If
in
they're at the
hallway.
door too, right? So, because
true,
that's
right.
another norm that needs to be
We need to get that right.
reestablished, right?
Agreed.
And I would add to it that teachers are often on their phone in the halls. And I'm not saying that it's not warranted, that there's not something important they have to do, but it should be in their pocket till they get into the teacher's lounge. And then it comes out and the phone call is made or the text is sent or whatever the case may be. But that creates a lot of conflict at the high school level.
Well,
When
we
kids see
talk
that.
about how like the admin team, there are 8 of us this year, 7, there are things that are appropriate for the walkie-talkie, and there is just a lot of communication that needs to happen in a building our size, and we use G-chat with each other, and so we are often, I think, our own, we want to model the behaviors, that are expected of students, and we need to narrate the ways in which there is a difference, like in trying to be a team that manages a building this large, like when we're at lunch, we need to be able to, so we frequently sending messages to each other via a cell phone, and that is different than being in a classroom when we should be learning. But even like narrating that difference, I think it is really, it is challenging to picture being an adult who never uses their cell phone in the hallway, when it is a part of safety, like when things happen, when we're looking for a student, we don't say names on the radio, so we are quickly messaging.
Is that just admin or admin and teachers that are communicating that way?
Teachers should not, they are not communicating to
Okay,
us.
so it would
So it's an admin
Okay, but
challenge,
Dr.
different
Kelly
than,
is
yes.
referencing the teachers who are.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it is a dynamic,
But
like I
that's
feel
an
very
example of
aware.
that, right? So
I feel very
even
aware
for
when
the
I'm in the hallway.
administrators being
Yeah.
on their phone in the hallway.
Yeah.
The kids don't know what you're doing.
And the number of times in the beginning of,
Right.
like, and I wanted, so we had to talk about classrooms and they'll call it, we talk about at passing time when there's thousands of 2,000 kids that are in the hallway. And then not at passing time when you're walking in the hallway and you see a kid on their phone and asking them to put that away. The number of times I've like, so like such a hypocrite because I'm literally on my phone saying, hey, you need to put your phone away. Like it is, and again, it is appropriate for me. We can rationalize how it's appropriate for me to be on my phone as principal of the building and not appropriate for a 15-year-old to be on their phone because the policy says they shouldn't. Try telling that to a 15-year-old that, like there's a challenge, there's a challenge that comes with that. And I think that's a fixable challenge more so than the at passing time. I struggle with thinking how we at passing time enforce taking
This-
phones from everybody
Right.
in their.
I do say to every kid I see with a phone, when it's not passing time, put it away. Sorry, miss. And they put it away. And then they go around the corner and I know they take it back out again, right? But, I can't even fathom how that would work during passing. It's just, the halls are very crowded.
Well, and we want our attention to be toward, I think we've been talking about this today of navigating that, that question of when is the right time for, in trying to have class time be for learning and protect that evenness. And we have teachers who have all students off their phones. We have teachers who set very firm expectations and students know if I take my phone out in this class, it will get taken. And that works and kids can go 80 minutes without looking at their phone. But there is something we are not at an answer, but the hallway, the passing period, most kids are moving, like when you look around, there's not everyone down in their phone, like kids are moving along, students are moving along, but we wonder whether that is an appropriate time to check a message from a family member or a job. And also in thinking about our attention is towards the safety of the building as everyone's passing, and because often an adult might be interacting with students, they don't know about a cell phone, like to interact about the cell phone in that moment does pull attention away from the passing period moments that are just sort of give and takes of what our attention goes to during a passing period that has us think about that time block differently than the classroom time block or students in hallways during the classroom time block.
Aside from the, go ahead, was that you, Jackie?
Yeah, you can continue that.
Aside from the initial meeting that you had to disseminate the policy or to, inform the teachers of the change in the policy, have there been any other meetings or discussions with teachers regarding instruction and how they should or any instructions whatsoever as far as what's expected of them?
With students, yes, at assemblies, with teachers, no. And so I think that's another key point of like
That's clearly the key point.
The key point,
Yeah.
right.
These
And-
kids are not gonna
right.
self.
And the kind of what are we consistently asking to see in every single space and how do we, I agree with you. I think that is similar to their messaging in the morning, that what is the consistent messaging that we're repeating and reiterating at all of those points? So that is a need of improvement for us.
Thank you.
I also want to acknowledge the mayor has joined us, so thank you so much for coming around, I'm sure. But I have a few thoughts. So a big thing I'm hearing at the high school part is teachers, right? And so a lot of it also, comes with behavior management, classroom management, which I know there's always room for growth in. So what I'm hearing, my question was, what are at the high school levels? Because that's where my biggest concerns are. What are some changes that are coming? And I'm hearing that there's been that collaboration with the RTA. And so a plan will be rolled out into the fall. I'm also hearing that you're going to bring back the daily morning announcements.
We have announcements, so we need to add the cell phone reminders
Yes,
to
but-
announcements, yeah.
And you're also looking to do something to remind teachers as much as we remind students.
Like the calendar for the year, when we
Right.
do building based,
Right.
we worked on our calendar for the year of how we spend our teacher time. A main way that they spend time together is in their course units, which is a need for them to collaborate on, like, what is our curriculum, how are we instructing? And also we defined what are the times where we need building based work and developmental work around all of the systems we're implementing. And so we have a greater, like, different than last year, we've designed and we shared to teachers the calendar on the last principals meeting, what that looks like, so that we can build in these exact meetings, trainings, time for processing that you're talking about.
And the idea is that they're kind of these building-based times, because at the high school level, we only have 2 PGT, those collaboration times, Monday, Tuesday morning for about 35, 40 minutes. And whereas I think in the middle schools, there's that time every day. And so, we've been kind of trying to be thoughtful about when in the year are times when we have building-based things that we need to engage me with a group of 30 faculty member, Caitlin with another group, kind of, people experiencing us 210 on 8 is very different than people experiencing 30 on me, 30 on Caitlin, that is sort of like our group that we're working with. And so we tried to plan those out around when are our admin meetings, when are our principals meetings, when are times in the year when rolling out things like this require consistent messaging, time to then bring back challenges teachers are having with that to inform us on like what supports do they need. That links to our Thursday meeting of, well, how do we plan out those supports and how do we bring what we would likely ask of them to be back to them the next week. So we kind of, there's a cycle to those meetings that I think will be helpful because we've not created space, based on how our schedule is, we've not created space to have those small group meetings to process these kinds of things and model and troubleshoot and have the teacher who is really excellent. I can think of a handful of teachers that I think about who are excellent at managing their
Believe that.
classroom to model for other teachers who maybe are newer or maybe are not newer, but have never felt that that was what they wanted to be doing. And how do we say, this is what we're doing as a school and how do we, in those spaces, those smaller spaces, model that? So I'm optimistic that the planning we're trying to do to kind of compartmentalize or kind of bring those
Get back to
smaller
that.
units
Yeah.
will help.
Give
us get to
attention.
that.
And I know this was the first year we had this policy implemented, so I think for me, it'd be great to check in with you, all, especially the high school team, check in with you once the school year starts, like a month or two in, to see how those changes are actually going. Just one more question for me, and then I'll open it up to others, because we have more on the agenda, but so at the high school, are parents also being asked to come and pick up phones? Like, what does your tier 2 and tier 3 look like for students with consistent problems?
Yeah, so there is, the most consistent response at the next level is docking it in the assistant principal's office, whether it's for the day, whether it's for a week, a period of time, or whether it's kind of families coming in, and having contracts put in place around phone use for particular kids. So I think there's, room for growth in terms of day of come to pick up, implementation of that policy for parents. And I think that is, I think definitely an area for us to grow on. The majority of that kind of parent level involvement has been on the phone. This is what's going on, and we're keeping the kid's phone for the day. There's a plan to dock it for the week or whatever period of time it is.
And that can be a mind shift struggle for parents as well, because a lot of them think of their high schoolers, especially if they're juniors or seniors, as independent and need to be responsible for their own stuff. Whereas the parent of a sixth grader doesn't feel that way.
Right.
So often, I know that we've talked about, when you do try to engage families, sometimes they say that's on them. And then that can be a challenge because we don't want to keep a kid's phone because a parent is refusing to come and help them regain it. There's a whole wormhole there.
What about taking it away from students? But if a parent can't come, they can have it at the end of the day. So like they can check it out as well, but still taken away during.
That is.
Yeah,
that
that is,
consistently what-
that's already happening.
Can I just add on one thing? There's a couple of things you said that resonated with me, and I think are really important. One really specifically is, you talked about like reasonable exceptions. And I think where like relationships really come into play with the students, whether it's administration or teachers, right? And those meaningful relationships with your students one of the things that we did at the beginning of the year, and I didn't mention, was talk to, if there is truly an emergency, if you're a mother, if somebody reaches out to you, we understand that that's going to happen. Come talk to us. Just come say, I really need to talk to my mom. We'll give you the space. Come to the office. We'll put you in the conference room and you can make that quick phone call and walk away. And we've had a number of students, I know just for me personally, have come to me over the course of the year and said, my grandma's about to take off and leave to fly to wherever. I really need to talk to her. Fine, come to the office, you can do that. Or a student in the lunchroom who found out there's a great after school activity today and just is dying to call mom, right? And can I just call my mom? Sure, just step over to the office, do what you need to do and come back, right? So I think that's a really important piece, that we're respectful to students, but we also need to create that relationship with the students where they're comfortable asking instead of just thinking they're going to be told no and trying to sneak that through, right? The second piece that you mentioned that sort of resonated with me is you asked, are the teachers afraid of the conflict? And I don't think it's so much the conflict, it's the power struggle, right? And one of the things I tell teachers at the beginning of every single school year, don't put yourself in a power struggle where you're going to lose, because it's going to undermine you for the rest of the year. Every student sees that, and you've lost your authority with those kids. Some of those kids are going to do it on purpose just to get in class, right? And so I think a really seasoned and really, sort of thoughtful teacher isn't going to enter into that power struggle with a lot of students because they know they're going to lose. Kids going to say, they're going to challenge you, and they know that you can't just go grab that phone or do those things. And so they're intentionally going to walk away from it. It doesn't mean it's not subsequently addressed by calling administration or something like that, but it could be something that goes seen by other students. But I think it's actually a move by teachers that I think is a smart move to not engage in a power struggle that they know they're going to lose, because it's going to impact them.
I think that we can be more supportive of
I just
teachers
want
in
to
that.
articulate that.
Is helping them all. What is the consistent language they use when that power struggle starts, right? How do we consistently, for a temporary period of time, drop that expectation and then communicate to our team, I need support on this with that kid. Like, I think that's sort of the communication feedback loop that I think we can be better about, and helping in those meetings saying, okay, this is what you do in that situation.
And that's
this is
where
what we
something like Joanne's spreadsheet is helpful.
Right.
Because if a teacher can go in and say, you know what, I'm not going to engage the way that Thad just described, but I am going to log in.
Right.
That you were disrespectful and rude and it was all over a cell phone.
Right.
And then the whole team can see that because it's an.
And the one last thing is, you do have a big task in front of you to get like all these kids reeled in and get the support of the teachers all being consistent. But you have 600 kids coming to you,
Ninth graders.
that the ninth grade, that know the expectation.
Exactly.
And know that when a teacher asks for that phone and an administrator will be called, they're handing over that phone to you, because that's what they've done
Right.
for the past 3 years. So like, if you can leverage them, then you only have 2,200 minus 600, right? So, I mean, and they may get the sense that,
Yeah.
oh, I know it's like, I can do whatever I want, but like, it won't take much
Right.
to, and then just say, well, Mr. King's coming up there.
But in elementary school, right, they have like the smackdown.
Yeah.
It's like this, so it's so strict,
Right.
and the kids are just, very well behaved, they don't step out of line. Middle school, they try to
Yeah.
wiggle a little bit more.
Right.
So it's just
Yeah.
like maintaining that consistency, give them,
But just,
some freedom, respect, but boundaries, guidelines, standards, expectations.
just keep the thumb on those ninth graders.
Right.
I think another soft support to teachers is through, and again, like the global announcement, I will say to the school community, teachers, remember, you've got to make sure the phones are away so the kids hear that I'm saying to the teachers, so they know the
They can put it on us.
It's like put
So
on
then the
you,
teacher can
right.
say, well, you
Oh,
heard
that's
Miss Bob
smart.
this morning. And then we just have them call us. I don't want them fighting with kids either. I mean, our kids are amazing at the Rumney. They typically are very few and far between at the middle school level in general that they're going to argue with an adult, but in order to save time and increase time on learning and all of that, I just have the teachers call us. We come, we talk to the student outside of the room, and I would say probably 99% of the time, I walk away with the phone, the child goes back into the class, and then we handle it with the parents. It's not as big a deal in the beginning. It could be kind of a cultural shock for kids that are addicted.
Mhm.
Per the National Institute of Health and their longitudinal study, it really is an addiction that they have that we're trying to break. It's so bad for them, and the more we communicate with families and meet them for coffee and talk about what's in the phone and why we want that away for the day, I think that's a big help too. But teachers don't want to argue with kids. We have a lot of new staff as well that they're just learning how to be a teacher. This is their first teaching job, and now I've got this other layer,
Mhm.
and not necessarily seeing it as part of the work, but it's a big piece of it. So just those little soft supports, I guess. I would
Yeah.
call them.
I recognize it is an ongoing discussion, so are there any final comments for today?
I
So,
haven't made any yet. I think, in my personal opinion, I think the middle school's fine. I worry about the high school. I don't know if we've moved the mountain any in the last year, and that's concerning to me. So I'd like to see you come back maybe October, November, whenever it's convenient, and just tell us where you're at and what we can do to support you. Whether you need more bodies, whether you need the cell phone police, I don't know. But I do think, I really do think that we haven't moved the mountain up here. When we were doing the handbook, last year, Mr. Buhay showed me, what the spreadsheet looked like, and he goes, because we were talking about it when we were doing the student handbook.
Mhm.
And he showed us the spreadsheet that they had, and he goes, and he was very proud of it, and he said, this works and all that, so. I wasn't really, my concern isn't at the middle school level, really, it's more at the high school. And I realized what you're saying, when we passed the policy, one of my suggestions at the time, it didn't pass, was possibly letting them use their phones in the hallway, because I don't think we can effectively stop that. What I'd like to see is when a student walks into a classroom, the phone's away. I don't really care about the hallway. I agree, it's almost impossible to police. We could probably give you 100 people and you still couldn't do it. But I think, if someone can put their phone away for 80 minutes, and then, in the 81st minute, look at their phone, I think they'll survive, unless there's a dire emergency, and then that's a whole nother thing, but.
We're aligned on that. I think the question.
Yeah,
is
so
how-
I'm not, I would never criticize anyone for not enforcing the cell phone policy in the hallway at the high school. But in the classroom, yeah, and like I said, I don't think we moved the mountain, and that's kind of bothering me. And I understand all the challenges you have, I get it, but it's something that, it's a detriment to learning. I'm not an expert, but I've read 100 articles on it, and they say the same thing.
We agree, teachers agree.
Yeah, so we gotta do something, and I just, I think the announcements might help. It's worth a try. I don't know what else we can do, but please come back to us. I think it's our job to give you the tools that you need to do your job. So I think that's something, you come back to us and say, okay, this is what we need, or this isn't working. Because, I don't know that it's working up here. Thank you.
I'll let you go.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, because I was gonna say something. Yeah, you go.
No, it's just my suggestion. Aisha was chair of policy and procedures, so maybe she might want to make, some kind of meeting with them after school gets started, like give them a month or two
Mhm.
and see where they're at, and then she can come back and let us know how everything is going.
Mhm. Sounds good.
The only thing I'd like to say in closing is on the cell phone policy, I think we have to start from day one in the first grade and then be consistent in our policy all the way to the 8th. I think it could diminish a little bit by the time we get to the 9th, because the kids will be more trained and they know what's the right time to use it and the not, the wrong time to use it.
thank you all so much for.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. Have a good summer. I don't see you.
Yeah.
So for the sake of time, any questions on the minutes from anyone? Any questions on the warrants? No? Okay, and we have no financial reports, no food service financials or communications or enrollment updates, Any questions on the personnel items?
I guess, I mean, I just have a general question. The list seems very, very long
Matt,
on the number of resignations and retirements. And I'm just curious if there's any type of general consensus as to the cause, or if it's just, you know, timing.
I believe is smaller than what we have had,
What is it?
the retirement.
The retirements are smaller, right, exactly.
And, as far as resignations, that has even decreased.
okay,
I mean, it's still a long list, but the number has decreased.
This list looks, I mean, I don't recall us receiving a 3-page.
Well, you have your resignations.
Yeah,
And then you have your others, which technically is let go.
right.
I can just speak to the other column that does include educators who were either on a 1-year contract or were working on a waiver and what's that?
The licensure?
The
Yeah.
license,
Okay,
yeah, and that was huge.
okay, thank you, that's,
So,
I knew there was.
Dr. Galucci, so on the other, are these others potentially gonna come back?
some could, yeah, absolutely. But as of the moment where we're planning for next year, we have to non-renew them, but the principals, especially obviously educators that did a great job, had those conversations and said to them, you know, you just have to pass this MTEL.
Yeah.
And once you pass that MTEL, reach out to me.
So, and how often is the MPO?
Whenever they schedule it, it's
Yeah.
online.
Is it several times a
Ongoing.
year?
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they
You
had
can take
like.
one that's like
for
6
the-
weeks later.
They've had the whole year to.
Yeah.
do
And
so.
they-
Do we give them the summer?
Well, there's other licensure requirements that could impact, like if they finish their program or not. So you have to pass the MTELs, but you have to have a certain number of credits as well.
Oh,
graduate
okay.
credits. So they could have been hung up on something like that, but I know just today we've rehired 3 of the people that are on your
On
list.
the others?
Yeah.
I hope they're the Britos.
I can't, I
I'm gonna have to give a smack. to them.
can't say anything, but
But I think from a district standpoint, if we don't have that meeting, what we risk is someone who says, oh yeah, I'm gonna get licensed over the summer.
But then
And then
don't.
if they don't, we miss all these candidates and all that time has elapsed.
Right.
And suddenly it's August 10th.
and then Desi says, well, we're not gonna give you a waiver for them because we already gave you one last year.
They didn't do what they were supposed to do.
And we got no
Do you
teacher.
have any indication that maybe some of these people are planning on getting what they need to get during the
Yes.
summer?
Yes.
No, that's,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
promising.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
That's one quick question. What's the percentage of, it's like 45 here, that are just not coming back, they didn't renew, or just for their license and
I'm looking
everything?
into that right
Okay.
now.
I can answer it.
Oh, you have it?
26 were licensure issues.
So 60% of them?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And one other thing that I'll say about that is remember that it's been very difficult to hire teachers for the last several years. So there could be people on this list that have been with us for 2 or 3 years, but now we've exhausted our waiver opportunities, our emergency licensure opportunities. So they've been with us for the last couple of years as we recovered from COVID, but DESI's no longer extending some of their leniencies, and that could be why they're on this list. It doesn't mean that they're a first-year teacher if they're here, so it depends.
In addition to the 26, we had teachers that were hired on a 1-year contract, and someone that was on 1-year leave. If that
Mhm.
person comes back,
They're up.
unless
after the
there's
year.
another spot across the district that we can push them towards.
Which we do try to push them
We do,
towards those if
yeah.
they're licensed.
Yeah,
How are these, the number of resignations and others here gonna impact us come September? If we have difficulty filling them?
We're already working on it. We're already filling jobs. So we'll have to see. But this is not, hugely atypical. Remember that we have 800 teachers in this unit.
Mhm.
So, I think there's actually more than 40 on here. I would have to count them up, but I would say it's under 10%.
Okay. Still under 10%.
Yeah,
Okay. I think the optics of it just seem,
it's a long
at
list.
glance, yeah, it just seems.
Well, and the other thing that I should point out is this is all staff, not just teachers.
Right.
So there could be some secretaries or other support personnel mixed in. I'd have to look at it.
Are there any positions here that we no longer need, or we can be more efficient and we could, I'm not talking about teacher roles, but any staff positions has that been considered at all?
The only place where I look at, where we have more capacity now than we used to have is with the health technicians, which we brought on board when COVID happened because the nurses needed an extra pair of hands and eyes when we were trying to figure out coming back to school, and if the nurse had to be tied up with somebody who we thought was COVID positive, somebody else needed to keep that space clear, or in some cases, we had quarantine rooms that were separate from the nurse's office, so you needed an extra pair of hands to be in that quarantine room than in the nurse's office. And we did hire a health tech with each nurse. They were partnered up. And since then, we've been not replacing them as they move on from attrition, but we've not let go the ones who have chosen to stay with us. And that's actually benefited to us, for us, because we have had trouble filling some nurse positions in the last couple of years. And it's been helpful to have those extra hands, especially there are some of them who are super well skilled and their nurses have trained them well, and they're very helpful to have in the office.
But those are people that have no healthcare background, that can't
Correct.
be expected to fill in and do the duties of a nurse. If they're absent.
1,000%. I agree with you 1,000% on that, but they can be that extra pair
That
of hands.
paperwork, they're in
Admin, making
We
calls to
had
the parents and
Yeah.
things like that.
meeting yesterday for health and wellness concerning the nurses because some of the things that were brought up at our last meeting.
Mhm.
And it went very, and I don't mean. I mean to jump into the agenda. We were talking nurses and that's why I jumped in.
Yeah, no, I immediately went to the meeting yesterday too.
Yeah,
But-
and it was very productive. I mean, Richie was there, Joe was there, Aisha came. And we also had our veteran nurses, Jessica and Connie, and it was very well. It was, everyone had an opportunity to talk, and I think everyone left there feeling like there can be changes and there can be, hope
Mhm.
Yeah.
for next.
That's great.
So,
Except for Richie. Kidding.
yeah. We didn't get any honorary nurses shirt.
Oh.
My mom's a nurse.
Where are we? That's about to be done.
We can just, so because it is 6, we can move the last 3 things over to unfinished business for our regular meeting, and then we can continue there.
It's already.
Yeah, so, can I have a-
Second.
great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstain? Okay, adjourned.